Good afternoon, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me. We're still waiting for quite a few people to join, so we're going to probably allow a couple of minutes for people to sign. Oh, hi, Hung. How are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, good, man. How you doing, dude?
Good. You're looking tanned.
Am I? I'm actually looking old, man. I mean, I was fiddling with the old Zoom, make myself look younger thing, and I thought, holy shit, this works.
Just so you know, you're alive, so your secrets might be revealed to the world.
I was gonna switch that toggle all the way to the right, where it completely removes the blemishes in your skin. And then I thought, you know what, that just looks so fake. It looks like I've literally had a facelift or something. So I thought I'd default back to normal.
Cool. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Dimmy. Great to see you. Hi, Hung. Lovely to see you.
Hi, how are you?
Great, thank you. Yes, enjoying some sunshine here today in sunny Sheffield.
It is good weather this sort of part of the week. I think we've been waiting for this damn summer, haven't we? But it's starting to happen, I believe, from today onwards. So fingers crossed.
Very cool. So I think, Hung, Rebecca, thanks for joining. I think we had about 60 odd signups live. I think we have currently about 27 people. So we're going to give it 28. We're going to give it a couple more minutes before we get the show started. And yeah, let's say 3 more minutes. Sounds good to me. What do you reckon?
Give us 3 minutes of gold then, Dimmy.
Oh, I don't really have anything for you. If anything, I was hoping to have a good chinwag with you guys because I've not spoken to either of you in a while.
Can I say one thing that's really on my mind? Like, I've just discovered this, right? But I think I need like psychological support. Basically, I've discovered I'm going bald. Like, top of my head, like you never look at the top of your head, right? Ever, because your eyes are not there. But I took a picture at the top there, and I thought, holy crap! Like literally losing my hair. Like, dude, are you getting this, man? Like, what the?
I don't think so. But to your point, I don't know when the last time would have been I checked the top of my hair. Maybe I should do it.
Don't do it. Don't do it, man. Like, literally live in ignorance is better. Because now I feel, oh my God, I'm like looking up hair transplants and stuff. It's like, I don't want this.
All you need, Hung, is a 6'4" husband like I have. And then there's somebody constantly checking the top of your head for you. Informing you how grey your roots are. Oh, thank you, darling. I love you too.
I think the competitive advantage of ladies is that typically you keep your hair much better than men do. I think I think my body is starting to move to a totally different age. You kind of go through phases when it's like 10, 15 years, and generally speaking, you're at that point. I'm on the precipice of a big change, which I'm not looking forward to. I've got to be honest. Yeah, no good.
The joy of wisdom. Of wisdom.
Small compensation.
It is, yes. So, when I'm out now and I'm speaking or talking to students, and I talk about the fact this is the 3rd recession in the UK that I've been recruiting graduates and students, they look at me as if I'm Methuselah. What? You've been doing how long?
It's a lot of recessions to go through. You'll survive, if anything.
Exactly.
Right. I think we've got good 33 people, about 50% of the people who had signed. I reckon more people will be joining, but maybe we'll allow another minute and we'll get the show started. So beforehand, maybe a couple of housekeeping issues. The format for today will be somewhat different. So normally the way, as you know, we run these shows, it's a pre-recorded episode. We release the episodes a week, maybe 2 weeks after they've been recorded. Today we're doing something special. We are recording live and we have an audience, which is exciting. And as you can see as well, we've got 2 guests instead of the usual 1 guest, which I'm very excited about. And both of them have been on the show before. So Hang was on the show earlier, well, actually towards the end of 2020. And Rebecca, I think you and I spoke earlier this year.
Indeed,
right?
Yes. So you brought back the rock stars.
My besties, yes. My besties on the show again. Correct.
Passed the grade. It was like, managed to pass the test.
It's true, not everyone gets a second invite. So, but I do, honestly, all jokes aside, I really appreciate you making the time and being here for us, with us to discuss this important research. So what we're going to do today, you can probably see I'm sharing my screen. We're going to quickly go through the latest research that we conducted on nepotism, more on this in a second. And then the three of us are going to dive into it and talk about it for a good 40 minutes, maybe. Half an hour, we'll see, and open up to questions from the audience. Just to ensure that everyone is on the same page, I thought I'll kick us off by quickly going through the key findings of the research. Just again, I don't want to assume that everyone has actually downloaded and read the paper. So you have to listen to me for a good 5 minutes, probably going through stats, but from there on, we'll open it up, and we can have a nice, healthy debate. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Dimitar Stanimirov. I'm the GM for EMEA here at Handshake. And today, as you've already heard, I'm joined by Rebecca Fielding, founder and MD at Grad Consult, and Hung Lee, who we discovered is beginning to lose the top of his hair. Jokes aside, Hung is the curator of the super popular recruiting Brain Food newsletter and also co-founder of Workshape.io. And I'll let you guys introduce yourselves properly after we've gone through the initial findings. But with that said, I'm going to kick us off and go through some of the research from the latest paper that we published. So first thing first, a couple of words about the research methodology here. So this combines both quantitative and qualitative research. On the quantitative side, we basically worked with one of the leading UK research firms, and the data was collected between the 5th of March and the 15th this year. That included talking to 640 current students, over 330 graduates in the UK, 350 HR decision makers in the UK. And on the qualitative side, we had one-on-ones with over 35 career professionals across different roles and university profiles. So again, all the numbers that you're going to see in the following slides include both quantitative and qualitative data. So we'll be talking about how the pandemic has largely affected access to opportunity to students, but in order to better understand that impact, we must also understand how employers have changed their approach to recruiting over the course of the past 6 to 9 months. And the first thing that I wanted to share with you is that the vast majority of businesses in the research that we conducted said that it's been harder to connect with early career candidates since the start of the pandemic. Now, this should not be really surprising to anyone. With all events and career fairs kind of going online, this totally makes sense. Now, a few key takeaways here. As a result, businesses are turning to existing networks to connect with talent. 51% of business leaders say they've become more reliant on personal networks and word of mouth recommendations during the pandemic. 59% said that they're now more reliant on LinkedIn for connections, and 51% say that they've become more reliant on personal networks, and 22% have turned to recruiting from friends and family networks. And you can see that these practices risk entrenching existing privilege and excluding candidates from less well-connected backgrounds, which is the key theme that we'll be diving into later. Companies are starting to see that just moving to virtual doesn't automatically level the playing field, which was sort of one of the beliefs that we all kind of had going into the recruiting season last year. And this is very much supported by the data here. Nearly half of the businesses that we spoke to feel that technology has the potential to level the playing field when it comes to hiring more diverse talent, but at the same time, 34% feel that the pandemic has so far made it harder to reach a diverse pool of graduates and students. And this is where we coin a term to kind of capture this sentiment. We called it Netpotism here at Handshake, and the definition of this is the danger of recruiting from the same close networks virtually, issuing the opportunity of broader access. And we'll be talking a lot about this in a second. Now, these new practices are showing up in the way students approach launching their careers, and they impact their aspirations, ambitions. kind of to get a better feel for this, this is a key one that we'll dive into in a second, but 33% of students and graduates think that job applications and interviews are biased towards people with existing connections. And this is something that we see both from the employer side and from the student side. 59% of employers say that they're now way more reliant on LinkedIn connections, while only 70% of students have used professional networks such as LinkedIn. And out of those 21% are actually unsure of the etiquette around connecting and messaging employers on these platforms. Now, similar underlying issues are at work, as more than 1 in 4 students have been frustrated by the entry-level jobs demanding what they believe is unreasonable amount of experience. And we can largely conclude that the requirements that indicate they're largely open to those who have connections and safety net to the relevant internships. Final few points here, like most challenges, these are not being experienced evenly. So equality of access is a huge problem here. 22% of students say that they don't have the tech to access career services since they have moved online. And 91% have experienced some sort of problem relating to the new way of conducting interviews during the pandemic. Nearly a quarter of students or recent graduates tell us they don't have the room at home to interview via video. That was 23%. And to kind of make this a little bit more granular, the most common problem here around access was poor internet connection, disturbing the video interviewing, being worried about someone else in your household walking in during an interview, poor equipment like microphones and laptops causing issues, all of which are problems that tend to disproportionately affect applicants who are well less off. Final thing, and I'll take a long break here. I just wanted to touch upon some of the things that the data tell us we could do in order to address some of these challenges. Nearly a third of the students, so 32%, say they want to more often hear directly from employers that they're looking for student and graduates candidates like themselves. And to kind of finish on a more positive note, we also found that universities actually are doing a good job at supporting their graduates. 47% of students and recent grads said that they were either satisfied or very satisfied with the support offered by university career services, while only 15% said that they were dissatisfied. Final 3 points. Potential areas of improvements that came from the report. 22% of students didn't know where to get support in the first place, which is pretty disturbing. 21% of students said the support was not tailored enough, and 18% of students said the university could have done more to connect students and employers. This is a very, very quick overview of the nepotism findings. For those of you who are more interested in this and want to find out additional information, the report is available for download at joinhandshake.co.uk/nepotism. And this is where I take a break. Hopefully, I managed to cover this in less than 10 minutes, and now we can open it to a nice and healthy debate. So I'll go to Rebecca first to kick us off here. So perhaps, Rebecca, we can start by sharing a little bit about yourself to begin with, a proper introduction, not just the couple of sentences I managed to sneak in at the beginning, and then maybe tell us a little bit as to why this research is you think particularly matters to you, and your initial sort of reflections or experiences of some of the issues that we highlighted in the research.
Sure. Thank you, Dimi. So welcome to everybody joining us. If you haven't met me before, or indeed you're watching on recording, my name's Rebecca Fielding. I'm the founder and managing director of Grad Consults. I've been involved in and around the early careers and talent management space for over 20 years of my professional career. I was an ISE board director for 6 years, have also worked in universities as well before founding my business 9 years ago, where we work with both employers and universities across this space, really helping the market to function in a better way by building understanding and ways of working on both sides of the fence. So that's a little bit about me. One of the things when I read the research that really resonated with me, what stood out and what would I highlight? I think particularly those pieces around promotion and engagement from the HRDs and HR directors who were interviewed really stood out to me. So that reliance on LinkedIn, when conversely we know that students don't really know how to access it, how to use it, really stood out as, you know, our go-to place not being theirs. And it's really strange to me because I'm of that generation who grew up with LinkedIn. You know, I'm one of those people who doesn't know how to live on LinkedIn. Everybody does. That is the professional workplace. This next generation see it as somewhere that their mum and dads hang out. I think, frankly, I don't think that they necessarily see it as the platform to connect, or if they do, there's certainly a lack of understanding about how to do that. That overrides the 50%, 7% relying on word of mouth. That's the really dangerous one for me around propagating the existing demographic within organisations and wanting to have that fifth, that 22% wanting to have that reliance on already knowing a candidate. And I think that interlinks with one of the other big factors that we've seen here, and again comes out in the research about work experience. So we've seen a massive dip in the opportunities for students to be able to either work part-time alongside their studies, because heck, you know, retail, hospitality, all of those roles have just disappeared. In lots of areas for part-time student workers. So that avenue has been closed, but simultaneously internships and placements also went significantly down. And we heard from students how they felt that those expectations around work experience were perhaps unreasonable when they were applying for jobs. And I think that is fundamentally linked to the fact that employers are asking for the one thing of students that they are simultaneously withdrawing from the market. So we want we want our cake and we want to eat it too. So we want students who've already worked for us, that we already know, that have done internships, have done placements. Oh, by the way, we're going to stop offering as many internships and placements and insight days and work experience opportunities. So I think there is, you know, and having been through this cycle 3 times in terms of the key recessions, you often see that pattern of behavior where, you know, we withdraw the opportunities as employers. Students then come through less work ready, less prepared, less connected, with less experience and opportunity for that work-based learning. And then we struggle to recruit because we haven't necessarily adjusted our expectations. So I think there's lots of self-fulfilling circles around this promotion stuff. Access was massive for me. So as you talked about, that 18% who don't have a tablet or a laptop, incredible to believe that higher education students wouldn't have that, but I think we can see that digital poverty in action there. And that for me really enforced the need for a mobile first attraction and recruitment strategy, because what we do know is that 98% of 16 to 24-year-olds have mobiles. And, you know, if they live in a region that's got less good Wi-Fi access, they might perhaps be able to access things through their mobile more easily, or certainly in different formats. So those are the key things for me, that link between work experience and work readiness, the promotion routes, and also this over-reliance on already knowing people or people connected into the organisation already, and how that has, you know, really serious issues in terms of equality, access to opportunity, and replicating demographics that already exist. So those are my key takeaways. I hope I didn't go
amazing
on too long.
No, very, very good. The same to you, I suppose. So maybe quick intro, and then share your key takeaways. I was trying to read your face while Rebecca was speaking, and you know, I couldn't quite make whether you were agreeing with things she was saying.
I hated everything Rebecca was saying, and I'm going to come in there. I joke. No, I mean, basically, everything Rebecca said was spot on. I don't think I don't think it was a controversial statement made there. You know, what we do have is very, I would describe it as a crisis, really, because distributed, you extend sort of the situation to distributed working, you know, remote onboarding and all that type of stuff. I think it disproportionately negatively impacts early career talent. Basically people that have small networks. You typically need to have an in-person environment to build a network. That's what has been the case in professional life up until this point. And if we're now saying, you know what, maybe we, default to remote, let's say, or, distributed working is going to be more of a standard, even any kind of hybrid is still edging away from that full-on, immersive experience of being in office. So all of these things I think are totally connected, and we have to urgently think about the impact on early career talent there. I do think that there is huge potential for a remote or a digital first way of interacting with young people. I think there is a huge opportunity to equalize a lot of things, because the way things were before was also not particularly equal. So we want to not sort of have rose-tinted specs on the past there. It was previously quite difficult for an impoverished student to go to multiple assessment centers, for instance. I remember back in the day when money was short. I was living in a wrong part of the world at the time. I had to calculate the cost of a train fare before I accepted an interview offer. It wasn't obvious I would turn up, because it would be, I need to go. I need to, what is the time of the train? Have they arranged a day of the timing of the interview so I can get there without having to book a hotel the night before because I can't afford the hotel? So stuff like that, right? So definitely remote can help, right, with this type of thing. But we've kind of like discovered new forms of inequality with this way of assessing and interacting with talent. So a huge set of challenges. I think we've got to embrace the remote, but we have to rethink a lot of the things. It's not going to be a clean kind of shift from unequal to equal simply by being remote. We've actually swapped one set of inequalities for another set of inequalities, and we've got to rethink all of that. So I'm excited about the space. I think there's a huge opportunity for product makers and solutions providers to do something exciting here. And I particularly think, the primacy of the mobile first experience has got to be the way forward. If you look almost at every platform, every recruitment technology, really 99%, 95% at least, I would say, are based on the idea that people are going to be typing into keyboards and looking at screens in this way. How many of them are actually built around the idea of, mobile only? So forget about mobile first. This entire thing needs to go through mobile end to end. Then I think you're going to get a lot more diversity in the pipeline straight away as a result of that. Yeah,
fully agree. Fully agreed. And I mean, multiple ways to sort of branch out from here. One of the things so we kind of outlined the key challenges, and Rebecca also gave a very brief overview of what some of the solutions might look like. And we're probably going to unpack this in a second, but I kind of wanted to start from the beginning. One of the stats that really stood out to me was the 33% of students and graduates think that job applications and interviews are biased towards people with existing connections. What are your thoughts on this?
Can I take this one, Hung?
Yes, sure.
So I was actually really shocked it was that low. Because I can remember being back at the beginning of my career, and as you said, Hung, not having that massive professional network, and feeling that was a significant disadvantage, not having I'd never been to the opera, I'd never been skiing, I hadn't gone to private schools, and actually my university experience was the first experience that I'd ever had in my life of meeting people who had done those things. And becoming acutely aware, moving up that conscious competence ladder, I was quite happily working class and thought I was really bright and quite cultured. I'd done a little bit of traveling abroad, which a lot of people I knew hadn't done. And I went to university and discovered this whole other layer of kind of cultural and social capital and connectivity and the world of business and commerce, which I was simply entirely unaware of. And so when I started applying for roles and applying for jobs, I certainly felt quite acutely that sense of a lack of connection to that world and those people within it, and that others had a much bigger advantage than me as a result. They had somebody they call, or that their dad knew someone, or or their mum, whoever it was. So I was really surprised it was that low. Clearly the hard work that employers have been doing around social mobility and the messages that they've been putting out in terms of both content and imagery and policy and activity is cutting through. And students are starting to see a difference, because I think even 5 years ago that would have been higher. I know if you'd have asked me back then, I would have certainly said yes to that question. I don't know what you thought, Hung, when you saw that.
I think it might be the type of the question might be interesting. Like, do they mean the application, like at a very narrow level, like the application experience that they went through, or job applications in general? I think if it's in general, I totally agree with you, Rebecca. It's possibly even a naive kind of the students might be naive in this case, in the sense that they may not understand, the importance of some of these the social capital, as you mentioned. I remember, as you say, when in your experience, Rebecca, you don't know what you don't know until you're there. So I wonder whether a lot of these students might also have that type of situation going. On a more generous side, perhaps there has been progress since our day, let's say, Rebecca, and maybe things have equalized somewhat. So yeah, interesting data for sure.
Yeah, my read on this was very similar to both of you. Actually, I remember when I was in my first year of university, shockingly, that's when I discovered the concept of internships. And this is a recurring theme here. Rebecca, you touched upon this, but I wouldn't have known about internships and the importance they had in terms of landing a graduate role. And it was through pure coincidence and chance that people that I happened to share a flat in my second year were all applying for internships. And by mere coincidence, I discovered that I had to apply, and I did apply and ended up getting one, and subsequently landed the job. But I know plenty of people who weren't that lucky and weren't aware. And by the time third year came around and they had to apply, they were caught unprepared. Because no one had told them. Parents didn't know. My parents certainly didn't know about internships. And so...
Can I say something here, Dim? I reckon what really the university career services need to have improved the service to students at that point. They needed to have a much stronger investment. The universities really needed to have better equipped the career services to provide that input. Because right. I think you're totally right. You learned it through happenstance and through complete random distribution of chance that your mates happen to know this, but it could have gone so easily the other way. And this is where the universities need to have had the equalizing approach to it. Be very, very conscious of what is required in practical terms. Like, let's give the kids real talk here. You can't be in a situation where you're afraid to say the truth, which is, a big part of this is, getting the right names on your CV as you get into sort of this work placement stuff. Get into the right circles, get into the right networks at that point. That needs to be given. You can't imagine sort of university departments, because they're academically focused, they're training you on the various topics. That should be their focus, but the department that should be taking care of it is the career service. So we need to see better from them, I would say.
I'm going to argue with you there, Hung.
There you go. A debate.
Bring it on. So we do a lot of work on the university side of our business, and I would say there are some universities that have responded and do respond spectacularly to a couple of those things. Let's look at Liverpool first. That conversation you just talked about with your mates, the peer-to-peer bit, Hung, yeah?
Yep.
So you listen to your mates. And that's how you find out about things. The University of Liverpool have adopted the career coach model, where they're employing their own students, they're training their own students, they're becoming career coaches for fellow students within the institution, and they're dealing with all of that stuff that, you don't need to be a highly qualified careers guidance counsellor to deal with. It's stuff like, where should I look for internships? Where can I get work experience? Look at my CV, help me prepare for a video interview. Your students peer coaching other students, amazing, spectacular stuff. There are lots of other universities who've adopted that model there now, and I think we're seeing some really innovative work in that space to essentially scale the message, because there's no way, even if you've got a career service, even the biggest career services in the UK are kind of 80-90 people, unless you look at careers group down in London, most of them, even with a 30,000, 40,000 student body, even if you've got the biggest careers population in the UK of 80, 90 people, you can't reach them all. It's impossible. The scale just doesn't work. And that's why you need this kind of alternative ways of doing and delivering, be it digital or be it peer coaching. And to the academic point, there are some institutions where which are very elite and very academic. You're right, Hung. There are some academics who were asked to write a brilliant story from years ago from one of my careers friends. He asked their head of maths department to write your employability strategy, and it came back as one line. It said very simply, to create one world-changing genius every generation. Full stop.
Wow.
That was his employability strategy, right? So I get there are some academics who live in that world, but that's the very elite global end of the market of things. The reality is, I would say that the vast majority of institutions, particularly, I would say some great work at the likes of Nottingham Trent University, Sheffield Hallam University, Coventry University, they've got deeply embedded academics who are very much engaged with employer projects, case studies, guest lectures, really bringing stuff to life in incredible ways. So
I need to caveat all of this by saying my data is like at least 20 years out of date.
There you
maybe even 30 years out of date. Because it's a long time since I was been at university. So I'm sure there's been decades of improvement since that time.
So much. The last 10 years, even, it's just transformed.
I'm pleased to see it. I mean, that seems to be evidence that universities, which some of which are struggling with budget, as we know, have diverted budget towards career development and whatnot, which is fantastic. I do think I've got sympathy with your maths teacher, though. I think that is what the university should still be there to do, and not just be a training school for professional or to professional stage. And maybe this is where we can see companies take a bigger hand. And we were seeing some evidence of if you want the talent, you're sitting there expecting universities to just like deliver this talent to you. Maybe you should invest something in there and play a bigger part. You can't expect the free stuff coming at you. So yeah.
Absolutely that. If you want work ready graduates, are you providing work experience? If you want graduates who can apply their learning to the real world, are you providing guest lectures, case studies, projects, funded internships, whatever it is? And I think one of the things that in particular linked to nepotism and equaling or leveling the playing field as much as possible that we've seen a lot of career services focus on in recent years is that focus on widening participation. Students who are first generation at university, come from poorer backgrounds or lower socioeconomic backgrounds, really thinking about how can we engage that population? Because the other thing is that traditionally a lot of career services spent a lot of time with the worried well. The bright, well-connected students are like, oh, I'm really struggling to choose between Ernst & Young and PwC. It's so hard for me. I'm getting lots of extra polish and tips and support and access because they've been given the advice and they knew what to do and they'd applied early. So many services have absolutely switched to say, we need to be going to those people who aren't coming to us. We need to find them. We need to do that outreach. We need to deliver things differently. We need to look at mobile first and digital and peer career coaches and embedding in curriculum, because that's the only way to scale and do things differently.
Yeah.
So has it completely worked? No, I think most services would say they're still not getting to the people who perhaps need the support the most. And that's a really tough nut to crack.
Do either of you have strong opinions on where the employers come into this equation? So obviously, Rebecca, you just said careers could be way more. They've done a good job, and you mentioned they could be way more proactive though in terms of reaching out to students that normally would not seek perhaps their help in the first place. Where do employers come into this? Because I kind of cannot help but think that being proactive on the employer side in terms of reaching out to those students that would not even consider applying to you, but you do want to increase representation, but kind of just opening job vacancies and say, hey, apply, it's not going to cut it. So I just wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on where being proactive from the employer side comes in.
I'm going to let Hung speak about this first, because I feel like I've dominated that
I
last
thought Dim asked you the question, Rebecca, so I was
Oh, was
drifting
it?
off. I'll refocus.
Do you want me to repeat it?
No. I got the question. The reason why I'm hesitating is that I'm not sure of my answer. Because it seems to me that companies might end up offering potentially a competitive alternative to universities. As you've seen, Google University startup, and starting to produce pathways to work, so to speak, that you can avoid going to university to do this. So you can see some employers do that, which is probably not what universities would welcome per se, even though having a more diverse way of getting into the labor market is definitely a good thing from the student's point of view. So great that these companies are doing this, even though it may be pretty much like them corralling a huge amount of talent and doing some really early talent spotting. Which we've got to think about that from an ethical point of view, and are people making conscious consent and stuff like this. Reminds me a lot of like how big sports clubs operate, where they would harvest in 10,000 kids coming in, and they'll recruit 20 of them that would be just super high talented, and they're going to the academy at the age of 8, and from there. So you can imagine that companies might want to do that, and we've got to think whether we're comfortable with that kind of pathway. The other way to see it is, do you want companies simply to do it as a good thing to contribute to society, right? I mean, hey, go and support this. So it's part of the CSR budget, really. It's to say, you know what, you're making this profit. Why don't you invest some of this out of this budget, and you can support local communities in this way. So I think there's a reason why companies would want to do that. It's obviously good for the local population, very good for things like building brand at an early point of view. If you're a big B2C business, I can imagine this would be quite a significant way to build brand presence and anchoring with these young people. So maybe you can do it this way. But I think there's lots of different ways in which companies can be involved. But maybe the default position, which I think is the default position, could be wrong, but of sitting there waiting to get these graduates coming in with first and 2-1s, which I think a lot of companies have probably had the confidence they were always going to acquire that type of candidate because their brand profile was so powerful amongst that population. I mean, Rebecca, you mentioned a couple of them straight away, right? In the UK, classic, the big accountancy firms, the big banks. There's probably maybe two dozen brands that you can imagine that would immediately attract a large percentage of these blue chip candidates, so to speak. And maybe they can get lazy because of that, because that's all they need to do is harvest out. So I would like to think maybe companies could expand beyond that, but whether we want them to take too much of the case is a big question. It's a society-wide issue. Although I'll finish by saying any kind of diversification of pathway into the world of work is a positive thing. So even if they did go the sports kind of route and just go super early, I still think that's better than doing nothing.
Rebecca, what are your thoughts here?
So I would agree, multiplicity of pathways. And I think it doesn't necessarily need to be exclusive and or employers or educators. I think degree apprenticeships are a fantastic collaboration between educators and universities and educational providers. So I think we are seeing that broader early career spectrum beyond just graduate programs that most early careers teams we work with now in bigger organizations have apprenticeships, school leaver programs, internships, traineeships, kickstart, graduates, postgraduates, all kinds of different things, degree apprenticeships. So I think we're definitely seeing that. I think what we haven't necessarily seen at the same time is that social shift that you're referring to, Hung. So I think what the government have attempted to do is to drive this social and cultural shift in the UK through legislation like the apprenticeship levy. In order to achieve, a shift towards more like the culture in Germany. So in Germany, most employers see it as an obligation to engage with education. If we want fantastic people coming out of our educational institutions, ready to engage with the world of work and clear about what they want to do with their careers, we need to be involved. And that's unquestioned in the German workplace. It's a part of what we do, and that's small businesses right up to the big ones. And I think that is deeply embedded in their culture and society in a way that it is not for ours. As you say, Hung, there's that expectation that academia is somehow a sausage machine, and that people come out at the end and we get our ready-made sausages come to work for us, but we don't think about what we need to put into the machine in order to get the sausages out. It's all about what the quality of what you put in and out, isn't it? So I think there's that cultural and social shift which you still need to make, which has started. And then I think there's some really practical things to diversify the pipeline, Demi. I think it is about going to where people are and stop expecting them to come to you. Go to the student societies, go to the courses and go to the institutions where there are diverse populations of students who come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Talk to the university careers teams about representation, offer opportunities, and be unafraid and brave and bold about using words like Black. I mean, we use these generic labels, which I think are both unhelpful and in some cases actually inciting anger in the student population. If you've got an issue, have a look at your diversity stats. If you've got an issue with Black representation in your business, then talk to students about that and what you want to do about it and work with them. So co-creation would be the next point. Go to where they are, stop expecting them to come to you. Be proactive. And then the final piece for me is, we know in this research, it says 66% of employers are anticipating that digital has a long tail, that we're not going back. This is going to be the way forward. That face-to-face will come back. When we talked about it on the pod, I talked about that elastic band that gets stretched and we'll ping back, but we'll still be a bit flabby. So when we come back and we're still a bit flabby, I think there's going to be this element of face-to-face. And I think the key is, when we do go back to investing in time away and travel and going to campuses, do it for D&I, do it for diversity, do it for social mobility, target that time and those efforts in the populations that need it, not those that you would have spoken to anyway, and not those who've got the connections and the affluence and the opportunities afforded to them already. So that those would be some of the practical things that I'm thinking about to really make sure that pipeline is as diverse as possible at the top for employers, and what they can do really proactively to engage with that.
I echo what you say, and I think kind of going back to this blended approach of doing a bunch of things online, because of the clear benefit that you get conducting that kind of process virtually versus face-to-face. When it comes to increases diversity and representation, I believe online gives you huge leverage, especially if you compare it to what the alternative would have been historically going on campus. I mean, most employers would only choose to go to a small number of campuses because they're only 24 hours in a day, and you can only choose to you have only so many resources, and it's number of people that can go up and down the country to meet students. But I think doing it online, you can cast a way wider net, for lack of a better term, and reach students in every corner of the island, as it is for us. But also, to your point, Rebecca, you can be very proactive and specifically focus certain recruitment drives to target those students if you feel you're lacking representation. I felt I have to throw this in here. I wanted to maybe take the conversation back to one of the specific points, and Rebecca, you touched upon this, the over-reliance, it seems, on LinkedIn. 59 or more employers, 60% almost, said that they have been way more reliant on LinkedIn connection to search for graduates. And this, to me, I kind of looked at that and I thought, this just doesn't make any sense. Not purely from a representation standpoint, but from a graduate, even if you kind of took the volume mentality standpoint, purely because LinkedIn is a professional network. And you said it, Rebecca, 18 to 24-year-olds, they're just not on it because they lack the professional experience. So it kind of seems like a very suboptimal approach to doing graduate recruitment. I understand that, that could have been the easiest fallback when going on campus was not available. But I just wanted to kind of dive into this a bit more, hear your thoughts around this. Is it just me kind of thinking this is suboptimal, or is it?
I think I'd be interested to hear what Hung says. I think there has been really significant efforts over recent years by both LinkedIn, some stellar work by Charles Hardy in former years and the subsequent teams, and then equally university careers and employability teams themselves, to engage students in LinkedIn in a much more proactive way. And so I think there is a base of graduates who are now engaged in LinkedIn, which certainly didn't exist historically. But if you're asking me why, I think it's that that human thing of under stress and pressure, which frankly we all were at the beginning of the pandemic. What do? You go to what you know, and you go to what's easy. And I think that was the reason for it. And if you can still get comparable results doing something that's easy, and there's maybe a few downsides around our D&I, last year I think a lot of employers would probably have taken that because it was easy, low costs, as you say, suboptimal, but still getting the job done.
Right.
So I think that's probably, if I think about why it was done in that way, I think that's probably why. I think this year's digital engagement strategies will be much more sophisticated and much more well thought through.
Yeah.
But Hung, you talk to people about technology and engagement much more than I do. What are you seeing and reading?
I've just actually done a search on LinkedIn just as a quick, as we're talking about this, just to type graduate in and see how many profiles emerge from that. Apparently, there's 11,800,000 people that have graduate in there as their within their title, which suggests that they're currently graduates rather than ex-graduates, and that's compared to 750 million LinkedIn profiles overall. So 18 million as your target, as your available market, and then the 750 million users. So it's a very small percentage of the user base on LinkedIn are actually graduates. Then you kind of think about the daily active users, and we all know that very few people are daily active on LinkedIn. Recruiters stare at it every day, which kind of makes us feel, and we're all recruiters, by the way, we're in that space, right? What will we do without LinkedIn?
L for love, Hung.
So love and respect to all of the LinkedIn massive here, but the reality of it is, this is like not a normative behavior. It's not normal behavior. Most people have a LinkedIn profile because they feel that they should have one, and most of them don't log in until they're looking for work, and that's episodic. That's like once every 2 years maybe, or something of that degree. So your daily active users, and you kind of think about that 18 million, or did I say 12 million people?
11,
graduates.
I think you said
11 million. How many of those are actually daily actives? You don't know. So it's surprising, but not surprising in the sense that we habituate to our go-to first, but it's the wrong marketplace for this early career talent.
Yeah. My kind of thoughts on this, and I think Hung has spoken to, I can't remember whether it was on the pod or whether it was when we've just been chatting, but one of the issues that I take with this is particularly the context of what Rebecca, you touched upon earlier, being proactive in reaching out to students. LinkedIn obviously as a professional network relies, for direct sourcing at least, relies on a certain taxonomy, which is predicated on you having professional experience. And if you don't have that professional experience, how do you find the relevant graduates for you, right? So this is kind of where, that number, kind of the 26, no, what was it, 59%, left me slightly scratching my head. There was one other, and we'll probably start thinking of wrapping it here, but go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, the only other reason that I can think why people would be using LinkedIn is linked to the Randstad research, which was done around Generation Z a couple of years ago. The second biggest influencer on career choice and career decision making for students is parents. So I think LinkedIn may also be used by some strategies and campaigns in order to influence and engage and expose parents to brands and opportunities, and not just the applicants themselves. So I just wanted to mention that because I know that is also a tactic used. Yeah,
I don't know if you can remember when you created your LinkedIn profiles. I think I created mine about 14 or 15 years ago when I was completing my master's degree, and I still had very little professional experience at the time. And I do remember being pushed by a fellow student to do it. And I remember, quite frankly, sweating because I didn't have anything I felt worthwhile putting on it.
Well, it's hard to complete. I mean, if you literally are one of those people that, and I was one of those kids that didn't go do any work experience, whatever, you can't actually complete your profile.
Right.
Right. You can't do it. You'd have to make something up to put into your experience, which, you know, is very, obviously very off-putting. And any UX designer will tell you, you know what, that's immediate signal that you don't belong here. So I can imagine there's lots of students might have tried to set it up and then been hit with this and thought, it's not quite right for me.
Not for me.
Yeah, until I get a job, and it's kind of the wrong way around. So LinkedIn have to fix it. But whilst they don't fix it, there's opportunities for other companies to step in and take that market.
And I'm going to politely decline the request about when I established my LinkedIn profile, because it makes me feel extraordinarily old. But let's just say it was nearer the beginning of the century.
Fair enough. I thought it'd bring, you know, the whole LinkedIn stat here full circle, because, you know, it kind of goes back to what Rebecca, you touched upon, that, you know, and you just said it as well, right? Parents tend to be the biggest influence. If your parents, if you come from a, you know, somewhat privileged household and your parents were on it, naturally they will guide you there. But for so many others, that just won't be the case. So not only you wouldn't have, you know, you wouldn't have let's say a complete profile, you simply wouldn't have a profile. And this is kind of where the disparity online becomes very, very blatant. Final thing to kind of start wrapping up and maybe open up for a couple of questions here before we run out of time. Sort of along the theme of being proactive and looking ahead, I was just curious to hear what practical steps do you think, and, you know, we can broaden this to university, career services, employers, and also technology partners can take to ensure, and we've touched upon some of this, but think of it as a closing statement. So what kind of proactive steps they can take to ensure a more diverse recruiting pipeline and more inclusive practices? I don't know who wants to take this first.
I'll give this a blast. And it's not going to be easy listening, I'm afraid to say, because the only way, in my opinion, to truly diversify the pipeline is to actually have diverse ways to get into that pipeline. And the recruiters that are recruiting typically want to standardize. That's the normal part of recruiting. If you think what recruiting funnels are, it's a standardized process at some point where you process people through. And that is always going to advantage certain groups of people over others. So if you want to really, have diverse people in, from different economic backgrounds and so forth, you need to find different ways to do it. Good example even comes down to things like the CV, for instance, is a classic example. That is an academic document. You need a keyboard, you need to have writing skills, you need to have all of those things. Yes, we assume graduates will have that, but you can imagine certain situations where maybe the person has gone to a more vocational university, or perhaps they're doing a different type of course that doesn't require the production of text. Then you got to think, you know what, is this the right way to accept an application? So, there's all kinds of ways. We're going to have to diversify the way in which we identify talent, diversify the ways in which we assess that talent. So that's the only way to get diversity at the end of the day.
Completely agree. The things for me would be many of the messages that we've woven through already today. So I think mobile first or mobile only, to pinch Hung's phrase from earlier, I think is key. Going to where they are. I think that applies to both. And many of these points apply to both careers and employers. So let's stop waiting for them to come to us. Let's go to them. Where we are focusing our efforts in face-to-face, and we've got this hybrid future that we're looking at, I think being very clear and direct about focusing that on D&I and social mobility is absolutely critical, so that we're genuinely making an impact with that time investment. And ideally that is linked to confidence building and to knowledge sharing around the opportunities that are available to people. So breaking down some of those barriers. So I think it's about being proactive, being mobile first, going to where they are, and building that confidence in order to welcome people into our processes. These are often mass machines of rejection. they aren't often funnels for spotting strengths and talents and opportunities for people. And I think a reframing of our thinking that would help, as would, I have to say, a reframing of our thinking around employer branding, away from selling people jobs and into radical honesty. There is absolutely no reason other than vanity that large employers need to be attracting more than 15,000 applications for 100 jobs. That's nothing more than a failure of employer brand. And I think bringing to life opportunities and enabling people to say, these are the good bits and the bad bits of my role, this is who it's for, this is who it's not for, and giving people the opportunity to select in and select out with accuracy and with knowledge is a key part of us all making this market function better for students, for careers, for universities, for employers.
Amazing. I think so. I allow 5 minutes for us to take questions. Unfortunately, Hung and Rebecca, there are no questions in the chat room, and I wonder whether this is because I failed to say at the beginning when Hung was making us all laugh with his follicle issues. That question should be typed in, or whether it was because you were so brilliant and you exhausted everything. There was, however, Rebecca, a comment made around one of your statements that you put forward, which was, I totally agree with Rebecca, more universities need to adopt the peer-to-peer career advising approach. Academics need to welcome employability into their classrooms. So I'm glad to.
I was going to say, I'm glad to hear it resonated. Just on the language, I say academics need to welcome employability in their classrooms. I think, a good proportion of academics that I work with now, that next generation of academics, not just feel the need to do it. That's how they think. For them, a really rich curriculum, engaging experience is one which is relevant, applied, is engaging, is real world. And that's where I think we're headed, really, with the next generation of really engaged and brilliant teaching and learning academics, as well as research academics.
Agreed. Awesome. Any final closing remarks from either of you? As always, it's been a great pleasure talking to both of you, and a good excuse to catch up, actually. Anything to wrap up?
I'll just say a few things. It's like I just want to emphasize it's a very exciting space. If you're working as an early careers recruiter, I can imagine it actually being quite tense and a very traumatic period last 12 months or so, where there's been lockdowns and the graduate flow's been stopped and all this type of stuff. It was probably as difficult a recruitment task as being a graduate recruiter, campus recruiter, early talent recruiter than any other type of recruiter out there. I just want to say, all that's true, but it also means that going forward, we've got an incredibly exciting moment where companies that are employers, products providers, and all the rest of it, we're really trying to reimagine and rethink a lot of these things. So exciting time, just dive into it, embrace it, and I think you're going to be in great shape. It's a good part of the recruiting industry to be in.
Awesome. And while you were speaking, Rebecca, I think you were just about to say something. I wanted to let you know that another comment came in regarding what may have seen an unfair attack on academics. So this is from Megan. She says it's very hard for academics. As an academic moving into career advice myself, this is a huge area of research itself. Academics can't be everything at all times either. Better liaising and connections between academics, departments and careers departments is essential. Use the trained expertise on site.
Absolutely.
I do agree, Megan, yeah.
I completely agree. Great example is, the husband of one of my colleagues, Kylie, is a geologist, brilliant climatologist and geologist. He climbs ice and saving the world simultaneously. Wonderful human being. And he was asked in his seminars as an academic to give CV advice to his geography students. And he turned around to Kylie, his wife who works with us, and said, I cannot think of anyone worse placed to give them advice about a CV than me. I have literally all I know about is academia and ice. That's it. I can't give them this advice. This is a terrible thing. Now, we either need to create space and the skills and expertise for academics to be able to do that in a meaningful way, or exactly as Megan has said here, to use the expertise and the knowledge at scale through digital platforms, through peer coaches, through a range of new and alternative methods to bring employability and specific advice to life like that to life in the right way. I think bringing in case studies, projects, applied learning is the ways in which academics help to either extract or embed employability, depending on your philosophical and academic pedagogy around that particular point.
Perfect, fantastic. Well, what a brilliant way to wrap up. We're top of the hour here. Han, Rebecca, thanks so much again for being on the pod again. Wonderful conversation as always, and hopefully we can make this a lucky 3. We can have a 3rd episode in the coming months. Why not?
I'm in.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much again. Appreciate the time, and I'll see you in the coming weeks and months. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening in.
Thank you.